Hello. Oh, here we go. About a minute and we're going to start, guys. Thank you.
All right, guys. I am so excited that you came. This is our final cohort meeting for Lighthouse. We saved the best for last. Austin is incredible. Director Carter's our CFO. He is brilliant. He is a talented accountant. We stole him from a large firm, and he came to work at Catoosa County, and he has taught me a lot. I have learned so much from him about the way public schools are funded. It is quite complex. If you have a really good math mind or an accounting background, you will follow right along. If you're more of a, I want to read, I want to write something, I had a tough time with some of the concepts he talks about, but they are super, super interesting to me, at least. And there's a lot of tension on how schools are funded right now because of the funding crisis in a lot of ways going throughout the nation on funding public schools, because we do know public schools are expensive. They cost a lot of money, and there's no question about that. And to see where this money comes from, how it's dispersed, is very interesting. So before we start, let's start off with some good things. I'll always start our principal meetings, our director meetings. We talk about good things because Lord knows there are enough crazy things going on in the world. So wave your hand at me and share a good thing with me. And I'll just bring the microphone to you if you don't, so you better start.
Thank you, Super. Some great news today. Today in this room behind this wall, I got to watch Jeremy Keener train and certify 17 of our criminal justice pathway students who are now eligible and hireable to apply at the Sheriff's Department for the detention officer certification. So, amazing, amazing. And they've got another round as well to go, and those jobs, he hired 8 last year, I believe, and he starts them in the 40s with insurance and retirement and getting those kids involved, and they will do that job until they're 21 when they can go to the academy, because you can't carry a gun until you're 21 and be an officer. So they're in the system, they're off the streets, they've got a job, they can apply at this sheriff's station or any police department in Georgia because they're post-certified, just like our officers on the street now. Amazing. Today I got to witness that. Yeah. Thank you, Super.
Also, I was just hearing that every single student that passed their phlebotomy test was offered a job in Catoosa County. We have the 2 hospitals, Memorial, CHI, and Erlanger, fighting over them. And these folks go in and they'll make, right out of high school, no college debt, $23, $25 an hour. So incredible. We love those opportunities for kids. Absolutely. Somebody else.
Okay, I guess I'll speak. Actually, this last weekend at Battlefield Primary, we just hosted our annual Spring Fling. So it's a huge outreach event for our local community, for our parents, and it was phenomenal. We raised a lot of money. We have a silent auction that goes to pay, and this is more of an outreach than it is a fundraiser. So we're just trying to pay for this event for our families. So it was really good. It went great. Yes. So.
One more wake up till spring break. Very excited about that. Yeah, one more sleep, one more wake up, however you want to phrase it. That's where we're at right now. So we're all very excited about that. We had found out recently that one of our schools received the safety seal, Georgia Ready Preparedness Safety Seal. So we went through the process. And no matter if they got the seal or not, our schools were able to learn so much from that application process. And of course, we're really proud of Ringo High School and their accomplishment in attaining that safety seal.
One of the funny things is Chris looked at every application when they went in, and they were pretty much all the same. And so when one school got them, got the seal, and our other 16 didn't, so Chris was like, So he sends an email back down and says, we pretty much all did the same thing. What happened? And so far we haven't heard anything back yet, I think. Still waiting. But they all went through the same process, and it was really, really good because it makes our folks better once they've gone through that process.
Our special education office is working with vocational rehabilitation to try to host 2 weeks of summer GROW camp. GROW stands for Getting Ready for Opportunities in Work, and it's for students with IEPs and 504 plans to start thinking about secondary post planning, explore work opportunities, learn some job skills. So it's a really fun week, and the company that we partner with pays the kids if they will drive themselves to the camp. Pays parents that provide transportation, gives the kids a budget every day for planning and ordering their lunch. So there's a lot of perks to participating, and the company that is organizing it with us said that they would make a donation to Catoosa County Schools for hosting after we finished. So we're excited about that.
That is fantastic. I love watching the students. They would take the students to restaurants, and they would learn how to roll the silverware and get the buggies and do things and greet. And it's so awesome to see those kids be able to get out and do those things. So, one more. Okay. Oh, that's good. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so we're going to get started. I do want to just recognize 2 of my bosses, and I appreciate them being here tonight. Miss Susan Gibson is here. They'll get mad at me for this, but I do it because I want our folks to know how involved they are and giving up their evening. And Miss Gloria Hunt is here. Thank you guys both for being here this evening. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now, Austin, you may have to work in a few brain breaks, Doc, so you help. If you guys are good and you're like, man, I got it. This is easy peasy for me. That's great. But if we need a brain break in there somewhere, a little activity to share something, Dr. Butler, will you help us do that?
We actually have an activity plan that I did myself, so.
I love it. I can't wait to see it. Maybe we're going to get to count or multiply, divide, fractions. I don't know, but flashcards. So with that, Austin, he is, as I said, Austin Carter, CFO for the school district. He is a brilliant, brilliant accountant, and you're going to learn a lot tonight, I promise.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. One moment, please. Okay. I told you I didn't want to have to tell jokes, Becky. Chris? Huh? Well, here we go. Yeah, I'll tell you something good. So I'm going to talk about it in a second, too. But we closed out our audit last week, I believe. No findings, no material misstatements, clean bill of health. Yeah, maintained our low risk, and that's for the 5 years that I've been here. We've achieved all those things, so that was good news. All right, perfect. And that leads into this. So yeah, as Superintendent Nick said, my name is Austin Carter. I am the Director of Finance. I worked previously in the corporate world, in banking, and then in advertising, doing finance for about 10 years before I ended up at the school system. And I've been here about 5 years now. I moved to the school system July of 2020. Great time to switch jobs, you know, in recent history. But I do love it, you know, and I really, what I like about the school system is, you know, typically when you're an accountant, you're working for a company trying to make somebody money. But here, I can put my skill set into supporting folks that, you know, teach kids and raise that next generation in the classroom. So that is something for me to be able to feel a little bit better about what I do day to day. All right. As Superintendent Nick said, this is going to get complicated and a little in the weeds. But I've got some handouts that you have at your table that I'll reference as we kind of go through. I'm going to talk pretty granularly, but there will be plenty of time at the end for questions. And we had some questions at the end of the last session that we're going to answer as well. So we'll get into it. So how is CCPS monitored? This is a big thing that people talk about. And with us being a public school system, everything is out there. So all expenditures are governed by our internal controls, which means we have policies and procedures in place to make sure that our duties are separated, that we are following the rules and regs that the board has set forth. And then obviously we are under any federal and state laws that pertain to public education. We're monitored consistently by the Georgia Department of Education down in Atlanta. Just like they monitor what teachers are doing in classrooms or what we're doing in the special ed department or any other department, they also monitor us with a department called the Financial Review that we have to submit data to consistently throughout the year to make sure that we are utilizing funding correctly. Our eSPLOS funds, which we'll talk a little bit more about tonight, what those are and what we can use them for. They are specifically audited every year by a CPA firm out of Augusta. So they come in and spend a couple weeks with us, either virtually or on location, look at our facilities, and check that funding source and what we're spending it on specifically. And then the big audit every year is the Georgia Department of Audits. Takes about 8 to 12 weeks every year, and they come in and audit every financial aspect of what we do. So we just completed our FY24 audit last week, like we said, and no findings, no misstatements. So that's always good news, and my blood pressure can go down a little bit after that. All right, so big picture, talking about how school districts are funded. There's federal funding, as we've heard a lot about in the news recently. Mainly those are the title grants, Title 1, 2, 3, and 4, that address poverty and a few other things I'm going to talk about here in a minute. The state funding, which is all encompassing in the Quality Basic Education Formula, or QBE formula. And we also get some CTAE vocational grants from the state for what Mr. Pierce does in the CCA and other high schools. And then we get local funding, which is made up of property taxes, TAVT tax, which is on vehicles, and then smaller taxes like real estate tax and things like that. So specifically talking about federal funding, that Title 1, 2, 3, and 4, this year our allotted grant was a little over $2.9 million. And what we do with those funds is they're distributed to the school based on their poverty-based rank order. So Gina, our Director of Federal Programs, gets that funding every year, and all of the schools that are title schools, which are 11 of them, 11 of them are ranked based on their poverty data. And then that determines how much funding they get from these title grants every year. What this money pays for are things like parent involvement coordinators, academic coaches, additional academic interventions, which are tools to help kids that are struggling, instructional technology and supplies, and paraprofessionals. So paraprofessionals are the folks that are in special ed classrooms or kindergarten and pre-K classrooms to provide assistance to the teacher with students that need a little extra attention. They also support, in general, broadly, these are kind of their mission statements. They are improving academic achievement, improving teacher quality, student support and academic enrichment, language instruction for English learners, and supporting safety and mental health. So that funding, that $2.9 million, is divvied up based on the poverty levels, the various areas, and they support those initiatives. We also get a little under $2.9 million this year for IDEA, which is the law at the federal level, but it covers special education needs. It pays for paraprofessionals in those special education rooms, occupational and physical therapists, Well, I put physical therapist twice. Special ed specific instructional supplies and preschool disability services. So we have regular pre-K, and then we've also got a preschool disability program for those students entering the school system as well. We get a little bit of money every year for our homeless students, about $49,000. We've got more homeless students than you would think. You know, kids that are in foster care, kids that are at, what's the place in Walker County called? I can't remember. Yes, the Cottage. And that money helps them with transportation needs, gas cards, that kind of thing, tutoring, and any case management and coordination that our staff need to do for those kids to support them throughout their education journey. So one of the questions we got at the end of the last session that I wanted to touch on is, you know, what happens if the Federal Department of Education goes away? That's a great question. I wish I knew, guys. What we don't know is how this will work. You know, it has been stated specifically that they're not messing with the laws tied to IDEA for special ed or title for those poverty weighted funds. But, you know, that could change. Does the funding go away? Maybe just the process changes. Maybe some of the red tape goes away. On the reporting we have to do or what it can be used for. Maybe the funding is sent directly to the states, even though it is done that way now. It flows through the states to us, but maybe it is sent to them and they have the ultimate decision on how those funds are implemented and what they're used for. If that happens, will there be a funding delay while the state figures out how to do something they haven't done in a long time? And that could cause issues, obviously, when we've got staffing that are tied to these grants, that fund these grants, that are funded with these grants fully. So we just do not know. Ultimately, how it impacts the district is if it goes away or gets delayed, obviously it's about $6 million year to year, which is a big dollar amount to try to fill in another way. So we're hoping that funding will still come one way or the other, and it'll be a smooth transition either way. All right, state funding. So as I mentioned, the majority of that is made up of something called the Quality Basic Education Formula, or QBE formula. That was created at the state level in 1985. And it really hasn't been adjusted too much since then. So it's a little outdated if you ask me, but I am biased. And how it works in general is we report twice a year something called full-time equivalents, or FTEs. And what that does, it's a measurement of the students we have in the district and what services they're provided. So special ed, regular ed, kindergarten, first, second, third, high school, middle school, et cetera. The QBE formula then calculates the amount that we earn based on weights for each of those FTEs based on where those kids and services fall. So, for example, for a kindergarten FTE, we get $5,394.36. But for high school, which is the lowest weighted category, we only get $3,100 and some change. Obviously, special ed tends to be the most funded category. So depending on what category those students fall into, can be between $8,000 and $19,000 right now. The state does update those weights over time, but they tend to tick up in pretty small increments. All right, first handout. It's this one on your tables. Looks like a big grid with a bunch of numbers on it, and I'm going to zoom in even further here. So this is how we get the money that is allotted to us through the QBE formula. So this is a little behind the scenes here. This is what the state sends us every year that dictates how much we get based on the FTEs that were submitted in the October window, right? October? So this is the midterm allotment sheet, which is the one that got updated here in March based on the data that we submitted. And I'm going to kind of talk you through some specific sections on here that you can look at on your handout. So you can see the first column on the left is the direct instructional costs, and it's got all your kindergarten, first through third, fourth through fifth, middle school, high school, the special ed categories, and a few others. And that is where our FTEs are shown. So for this midterm count, we were at 9,890. And that includes everything except for pre-K, which is handled differently. With that, it takes those weights, calculates how much salary that earns us, how much operating money that earns us, which is typically, flows down for instructional supplies. And then it subtotals for that first QBE earnings column, kind of in the middle of the left side there. So according to this midterm calculation, based on the QBE formula, we would need $90,128,271 to provide a quote-unquote basic education, a quality basic education. An interesting mechanic of the QBE formula that's been in place for a long time now is something called the local fair share. It says less local 5 mils on the allotment sheet. And what that is, it is what it sounds like. It is equal to 5 mils of our local dollars that the state withholds or backs out of this formula every year because ultimately they want a local district to contribute, or a local county of taxpayers to contribute at least 5 mils. And so this is their way of ensuring they do that, by backing this money out of the formula and never sending it to us. So the state funds column after that is just backing that local 5 mils. So we're down to that $77,044,108. Before that, or below that, you'll also see a couple categorical grants, as the state calls them, that we get for pupil transportation and nursing services. So this year, we got a little over $2.3 million for transportation. What's interesting, though, is that transportation for us costs about $6.5 million without even trying, with diesel fuel, repairs that are needed, driver salaries and benefits. It'll trickle up this year a little bit more, probably about $6.8 million, something like that is what I'm projecting. Same thing with nurses. So we get about $250,000, but we have a nurse in every school, which not every district does. So that costs us a little over $1 million, even though the state only pays that $234,000. So we have to pay for those folks another way, whether it's through grants, through local funds. We've got to make those investments to have those folks in the building. And then the last additional category on here is the equalization funding, which was $3.95 million this year. And we'll get in depth a little bit about what equalization funding is, but essentially it is the state measuring us against all the other districts in the state and saying, hey, you are more or less wealthy than these guys, so we're going to give you a little bit of extra funding to make things more equal. So we, this year, got a little over $3.9 million for that. The other interesting part of this is on the right side. So part of that QBE formula is calculating how many positions we quote unquote earn based on those FTE counts that we submit. So you can see for teachers, for example, we earned 31.53 kindergarten teachers, 78.76 grade 1 through 3 teachers, and so on and so forth, for a total of 724.95. But what that doesn't show is maybe we need 730 teachers to serve the kids best, keep classroom sizes lower, those kind of things. So anything that is not provided as these earned roles, again, we've got to pay for with grant money or local funds. Subject specific, that second column is like art, chorus, those kind of things. At our elementary schools, we have art and chorus in all of them. But you can see for, just PE and chorus. PE and chorus, that's what it is. But you can see for those primary grades and grades 4 through 5, we only earn about 8 earned positions. So we've got 10 elementary schools and PE and chorus in all of them. So you can see there that we've got to invest a little bit to have those folks in the schools as well. 21.99 counselors, 8.99 technology specialists, and you'll see superintendent, assistant superintendent, principals. The ones on here that are always interesting to me too are assistant principals. It says, 16.18, but we've got 3 assistant principals in the high schools, 2 assistant principals in the middle schools, and 1 in the elementary schools, and it's been like that since the 70s or earlier. So this is not really providing the bare minimum needed amount of assistant principals to run a school effectively. And then the other ones that are always interesting are psychologists and vocational techs and social workers, or vocational therapists and social workers. We get 4 of those each, but as I said, we've got about 10,000 students. So that math is easy. So the expectation by this QBE formula is that each of these 4 social workers are going to see 2,500 kids and give them the services they need, which is not super realistic in our mind. Sure.
All right, so just take a little break. Talk to the people at your table about something that you learned or a question that you have, and we're going to come around and ask you in just a minute about this allotment sheet because it's really important. Also, think about what's not on here, what's not funded by the state. You got something that's not funded. By the state. We couldn't make, no. Not the stipends. I mean, their positions are funded for the most part, but all coaching stipends come from local. Same thing for like band, the band director.
I wasn't from like when I was singing
What?
earlier,
What?
I wasn't getting all rappy like this when I was
No,
singing
you weren't.
earlier.
You weren't. I didn't want him to get like, too much. Okay. I'll give him just a minute because I think this will be important too. So if I stop you occasionally, you're okay with that, okay? Yeah. All right, about 1 more minute, and I'm going to come around and ask each table something you learned or something you want to know. I'll start with this one. All right, guys, we're going to come back together, and I'm going to let you ask a few questions or make a few comments, whichever.
Thank you. I don't see anything in there for maintenance and upkeep.
Correct. Yeah, there is none of that in there. So any maintenance staff we have is paid for with local funding.
Can I share one item that's in need of attention?
Yeah, that would be, or custodians, or, one interesting piece is transportation is on here, but it only says 86 drivers, and it's not funding the full cost of a driver, and we have 110 driver spots, something like that. 122 to be fully staffed.
Well, I just have a specific that I'd like to address sometime. I don't know if it's... Okay, when I go to the school, Ringo High School, if I go to the auditorium, every now and then I have to go to the bathroom. It's right, the one that I go to, there's only one there. It's right beside the gymnasium where basketball games are going on. I go in there, there's one air blower that won't even blow out a candle for students and adults to dry their hands. Why? There's no paper towels provided. Why? We encourage hygiene practices, but we don't provide them, just the basics. So other things look great, but I would encourage you all, when you're visiting a school, walk into the bathroom. It's not a good thing to do, but it's a necessity. I see students, I see adults use the bathroom and then walk out because they won't stand in line to wait to get their hands dried. So I think some of the funds needs to, especially at Ringo High, that's one that I go to a lot. But I would encourage some facilitation of hygiene practices for students and adults.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lusk will be all over Ringo High School restrooms tomorrow.
And Mr. Nix actually found a hand dryer at Ringgold Middle that wasn't working recently, and Mr. Lusk got it fixed right away, so we'll check that out. Yep, thank you. But you're right, there's nothing about that on this allotment sheet, so all that comes out of our local property tax dollars. All right, what else? Let's see. Do you have something?
Can we let one of these experts speak?
Yes, or I'll move. Ms. Johnson, do you have something?
We just had a conversation about. We just had a conversation about coaches' salaries and how those aren't included in the QBE and how those are essential to student development, that sort of stuff. So I'm just curious about that.
Right. You want to take that, Mr. Lesker? Stop us.
I'll add to that too, Jay, that's a great point. Not only coaches, but our fine arts, our band directors, our drama teachers, our choral teachers as well. Those folks that compete at regional and state levels that can give up a tremendous amount of their time as well. So all of that is locally funded. We try to stay competitive the best we can with that. Unfortunately, due to circumstances that we're in, that's not something we've been able to adjust since about 2018. So that is something that obviously we have discussed, we've got on the table in terms of proposals and things like that, because it is very important. I wish math was the draw you kids into school and excited about it. I wish reading was, but unfortunately sometimes it's not. It's that band instrument, it's that production that's going on, it's that concert that they get to get, it's that football game or that tennis match that gets them there, and it's our coaches and sponsors that are oftentimes the link to get kids excited about being in school, especially when they get to that 6th grade and up level. So we realize the importance of that, and that is something that we are discussing. And I appreciate you bringing that forward.
A follow-up to that, does DC County have an educational foundation where private groups, private donors, private foundations
No, but I'm looking into that currently because somebody brought that up in a neighboring district, one of my fellow finance directors, and we think that's a great idea. So I'm working into the legalese of how to do that right now.
Thank you for bringing that up, because none of those things are included in a quality basic education, which is what the state deems that they pay for.
Yeah, there's not funds for prom or graduation or any of those things that are not part of that, school existence.
That's all extra that we invest in as a community because we want that for our children. All right, one more. You guys have something? Oh, Mr. Holcomb.
I've actually got two questions. One is under the Title I, II, and III program. You have a parent coordinator involvement there.
Yes.
Well, I started volunteering when my granddaughter went to middle school. First year, got all kinds of callbacks to help do this. Last 2 years, I have never been called back. I went and said, "Do you have any needs?" She says no. Also, during registration, the first year, she was out there registering parents as they came through. The last 2 years, you don't see that. So my question is, I've asked several teachers, I got several friends that they said they need help. I said, that's something might need to be looked into. Second thing is the 5 mil. Is that statewide or is that county to county different?
It's county to county different. So it depends on, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about it here in a second, but it depends on what your local mill is worth as far as how the state measures it. So we'll talk about that, how that works in a second, but you know, the local Board of Assessors does a measurement every year, but that is not taken into account for this local 5 mills here. It is what the state measures a mill worth for us based on their valuations.
And it's statewide that it's 5 mills, so every
Yes.
county contributes 5 mills. But because our home values are worth so much more, the amount we pay back is a lot more than other counties. So the amount they charge us for our students is more because our mills are worth more, because our houses are worth more.
Like, for example, Whitfield's got 2,500 more students than us, but they pay less in their local 5 mil share because their property values are not worth as much. And then, Gina, do you want to talk about I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Over the last several years with our parent engagement coordinators in the school. And I think the one you're talking about we had a long period of time where we did not have one. And my district parent engagement coordinator had to go not only do that, but help all the other schools. But we've got one of our parent engagement coordinators in here now from BPS, and that is one thing that we strive to do, is always encourage our parents to participate, be involved, and so that's something that I will check into and make sure as we're adjusting for next year. But it's been one of my schools has had a very difficult time in hiring as well as constantly keeping them, because it's been a lot of turnover specifically with that school.
How does the parent engagement fund that?
It's through the Title I grant. All right. We'll move on, and it's 5:43 already, so I'm going to try to pick this up a little bit. Yes. Okay, so state funding. This is just a look back at the last 5 years to kind of show you how it fluctuates, and you would think that it fluctuates based on, you know, those FTEs and those earned positions, but that's not always the case. So you can see there are a couple of years here where our earned positions went down, but our state funding went up, or vice versa. And so, you know, compared to fiscal year 2022, we were a little over $80 million. It dropped down into the high 70s for a couple of years there, and then for FY25, it bounced back a little bit. But why did it do that is the question. If our earned positions didn't go up, why are we getting more funding? And the answer is because of these state-mandated expenses that I'm going to talk about a good bit tonight. Looking at the last 4 fiscal years with those year-to-year changes, the big factors in there were 2 things. So the State Board of Health is our lone provider of state health benefits for our employees. So we can't go out there and shop with Blue Cross Blue Shield or United or any of those companies. And in 21-22, after the effects of COVID, the state raised what the employer pays for an employee to have health insurance dramatically. So it went from $945 per month per employee to $1,580 per month per employee. Good news is the state does fund those earned positions for state health, so mainly for teachers. But that is why it went up $5.9 million when we actually earned less positions, because of that huge increase in the state health policy that they provided the funding for the instructional staff. Similarly, in the next couple years, the governor gave state employees, including public school teachers, raises to the state salary scale of $2,000, $2,000, and then $2,500. But what's interesting is even with that raise, that would have been factored into the QBE formula. We got less money in 22 and 23, and less money in 23, or slightly more money in 23, 24, even though $2,000 for 800 and something teachers is, adds up pretty quickly. And then this current school year that we're wrapping up right now, we had both happen. So there was a raise given by the governor of $2,500, and then that state health plan cost for us went up $180 more to $1,760. So that new funding we got is not free out there to use for whatever needs we have. It is pretty much coming to us each month from the state and then going back in our payroll to pay for these increases, mainly to state health. So the major impacts on QBE funding, those FTE student counts, state mandated expenses like we just talked about, for healthcare, supplements like the governor surprised us between Thanksgiving and Christmas this last year and said, hey, I'm giving everybody a $1,000 bonus. And then we got the list and it was like, okay, you're giving like 80% of employees a $1,000 bonus. But that was something that was unplanned that would, drive our expenses up because the board, would approve for the entire staff to get that bonus instead of just the folks the governor deemed worthy. And then local state property value measurements have a big impact on our QBE funding, mainly through that equalization I talked about and that local fair share or local 5 mills. And I'll show you how that interacts here in a second. I won't read these to you, but these are little definitions of equalization and local fair share, but we've talked about them at this point. I think you guys understand the concept. And this is comparing that fiscal year 22 QBE formula to this fiscal year 25 output. And what is interesting is our FTEs went down, which means we should get less funding theoretically. But you can see our gross QBE earnings went up almost $12 million. But the two things that really kneecapped us for, getting this increased funding for these healthcare increases and those kind of things. So our local fair share increased dramatically, almost $4 million in just 3 years. And our equalization funding decreased significantly by almost $6 million. Some good news, the state only used to contribute about $1 million toward transportation. It's gone up pretty significantly last year to about $1.2 million. But even though our gross QBE earnings went up $12 million, we're only really collecting a little over $3.3 million in 25, which is getting eaten up by those healthcare costs and other mandated expenses. To show you the correlation between local property values and that local fair share and that equalization, just got some quick graphs here. This is our local tax, or this is our tax digest, which is a measurement of all the property in the county. That is, measured by our local board of assessors that the county appoints, and then is also measured by the state in a study every year. And you can see from 2018, it was 1.6 billion, and by 2023, it was 2.32 billion. So a big jump, especially between 2022 and 2023. So those same 6 years, our local fair share, which is money again that's withheld from us from the state, went from about 8.5 million to over 13. And our equalization funding was up around 9 or 10 million before COVID and through COVID, and then has dramatically decreased the last 3 years based on our local tax digest going up significantly. All right, and we'll jump into local funding. So in general, how does local funding work? The local county board of assessors, which is again appointed by the county commissioners, determines the value of all property in the county. It's known as the tax digest, and it takes into account things like inflation of your property. So if homes start selling more, the tax digest goes up, and then new property growth. All these new buildings and homes being built throughout the county also increases it as well. The county then backs out all the various homestead exemptions that are given. This sheet on your table is a table that shows what we give as far as senior exemptions that specifically lower school taxes for folks here in Catoosa County in comparison to others. You will notice that while at 65, or 65 and 62, they are income limited. We are one of the only ones that gives 100% school tax exemption at the age of 75. Most are all income limited and just straight exemptions, which reduces the value that you're taxed on your home. Sure, these are folks just in our immediate area as a comparison. I'm not saying that we're the only one that does that. I'm just saying. Sure. I can't speak to anybody outside of our region, but these are the ones that are kind of within our general area that we're typically measured against. So the county backs out those homestead exemptions for taxpayers that qualify. There are senior exemptions, as I talked about, exemptions for veterans and other low-income citizens. And all that the school system does is adopt a millage rate that is a multiplier based on that tax digest and the assessed value of property that the County Board of Assessors measures. And that determines how much we collect. What is a millage rate? Try not to bore you with the math here, but essentially a millage rate is an amount of tax dollars that we can levy, or any government entity can levy. It's $1,000 of property's assessed value. 1 mil equals $1 of the $1,000 of assessed value. So the school system, the county, both cities adopt a millage rate annually. Some recent data I looked at, the average home value in Catoosa County now went up to $277,000. We got 275 in here. From about 5 years ago, it was about a 60% increase. The assessed value in Georgia on taxable property is 40%. So the assessed value in this example would be $110,000. Our current millage rate is 14.870. So you divide that 110,000 by 1,000 to get the number of thousands of the assessed value in there, and then multiply it by the 14.870 to get the $1,635.70 of school tax. Obviously, no exemptions are taken out of that. That is what it is before any of those things are applied. This is the actual tax digest document that I receive from the county every year. What it does on the far left here, it lists what the digest was in the previous year. That third column in the middle is that inflationary increase or the reassessment that the local Board of Assessors determines. And then the column next to that is all the new growth in the county. So for this year, there was $124 million of real property growth that increased that top row on the table here. So big takeaways here at the bottom. Net digest in 2023 was a little over $2.3 billion. There was $723 million of reassessed value, $76 million in new growth, which brought the tax digest net of exemptions up to about $3.1 billion. And you can see our exemptions increased by about $78 million to $531 million and some change. As a point of comparison, the county's exemptions total about $260 million last time I looked. So we give about double the amount of exemptions as any other taxing entity in Catoosa County. These are those senior property tax exemptions that are on your sheet. Talking about the history of the millage rate. Back in 2016 was our recent high mark. The millage rate was 18.692. And the board has taken the rollback or kept the millage rate the same the last 9-10 years there, lowering it to 14.87 this last tax year, 2024. That 14.87 is the lowest it's been since 2001, so a long, long time there. And for comparison, with our neighbors. Again, Whitfield is 18.756, and Walker is 14.980. The scale here is that it can't go higher than 20, and it can't go below 14 if you want to get equalization funding from the state. So if you drop your millage rate below 14, you lose that equalization funding, which I showed was about $4 million this year. And this is our 5-year history of the math of how much was levied as far as local taxes go. So again, the top part here is those new measurements of property value within the district. So you can see back in 2019, that net M&O digest was $1.6 billion, and now in 2024, it's all the way up to $3.1 billion. Our exemptions have increased by about $230 million during that time as well, but those property values have just skyrocketed, over 50% in the last 2 years specifically. And it's just been that inflationary increase of how homes are selling in the area based on, our proximity to Chattanooga, I-75 going through the area, and really a lack of land in comparison to other counties around us as far as, the size of the physical county. During that time, like I said, the board lowered or kept the millage rate the same, dropping it to 14.87 this last year. So millage rate has gone down, property has gone up, and with that, we have collected more funding in the last couple years based on that property value growth, even though we've lowered the millage rate or kept it the same. So about a 59% increase in property value since 2020. How do we know these property values are real, or is there a consensus? Is there somebody checking what the local Board of Assessors measures every year? The answer is yes. So the Georgia Department of Audits, who does our audit every year and audits all government agencies in the state of Georgia, does something every year called a sales ratio study. What that essentially does is they independently measure property values in every county in the state, and they say, this is what we feel like the property values are actually worth. Then they compare that to what your local Board of Assessors has measured, and they give you a score. You want to be as close to 40 as possible. They advise between 38 and 40. And in 2022, our assessed values by the local folks were the second most undervalued in the entire state. We were like a 29 and some change. And the only county that was more undervalued was a county in South Georgia that I can't remember the name of. 2023, it did get better. Like I said, there was about an 18% increase in 2023, but it was still only about a 34. And so when that Board of Assessors here locally increased values dramatically in 2024, it was because of this study that said that we were quite undervalued at the time, even though that increase from 1.6 billion 5-6 years ago to 3.1 billion is hard to believe. Ultimately, what does the school district have control over? It's really just that millage rate in this process. We do not weigh in on the assessed value of property. The QBE formula by design is set up so that when local property values increase, the state says, well, they can raise more money locally. So they need less money from the state because your property values have gone up. So our state funding is stagnated or decreased. The property tax process in general, obviously set up by the state. I think like the assessed value in Tennessee is only 20% or 25% in comparison to the 40% here in Georgia. And then obviously any state or federal funding mechanisms are all controlled by the legislature, as well as any mandated expenses about health care and those kind of things that we've talked about. Since we're running long on time, I think we're going to skip this activity, but when this gets sent out to you tomorrow, if you're bored one night, this is a game that one of the government agencies in Georgia set up where you can say, hey, I'm going to say that we're going to increase a public school budget by 3% this next year. And it gives you a bunch of cards, and it says, this activity will increase the budget, this activity will decrease the budget. And you can go in and kind of see what the leaders in this room and in the district are deciding every year when we're trying to figure out, what are we going to put resources towards, and whether that saves us money, reduces the budget, or it's something that's going to cost us more money that we'll have to figure out how to fund. Thank you, Becky. All right, East Blast. So talked about that earlier. This is a 1% sales tax, or 1 penny for every dollar that the county has supported for the last 30 years, since 1997. 157 of the 159 counties in Georgia have an East Blast. And what it does is it funds all of our capital project activities. So any buildings that are built, any school buses that are purchased, we use East Blast money for. So it doesn't have to come out of the general fund. If we need custodial equipment, or equipment for the maintenance department, or any kind of repairs and maintenance like roofs, parking lots, concrete sidewalks, playgrounds, we can use East Blast money for that. Unfortunately, East Blast money can't be used for salaries and those kind of things, with that being 90% of our budget. But it keeps this stuff out of our general fund budget, and allows us to keep our facilities in good shape. The great thing about this is it spreads out the tax burden to folks that don't live here. So when that Costco got built, I don't know if when you go to Costco, if you look at license plates where they're coming from, a lot of them are not Georgia license plates, or not Catoosa County license plates. So when those folks go to Costco or stop at the new QT gas station in Ringgold, truck drivers coming through there, making a stop, filling up, getting some snacks, that all goes into this East Blast funding that allows us to keep our facilities in good shape, and equitable facilities across the district. Talking about school level funds. So these are non-taxpayer generated, like we talked about in a previous meeting. Typically, they're fundraisers, like one of our attendees spoke about earlier, donations from businesses or grandparents, parents, families, former students, and then fees for supplies and activities like field trips, stuff like that. So like we talked about in that last meeting, for the folks that were there, it funds things like our PBIS program, which is to curb and teach good behavior, and the rewards that go along with that. It does provide for additional instructional needs like math, literacy, STEM nights. Westside will have a English as a second language night to bring those parents in, because we've got a large population of those students over there, to continue that educational foundation and keep those kids moving forward. Field trips, activities for students, if they're going to the zoo for these instructional field trips, or any of the reward-related things. We never use taxpayer funds for those. It's always these funds that are raised at the school level. And then, in middle and high schools especially, in elementary schools too, they will bring in, guest speakers or learning opportunities, bring in animals from the zoo to teach about some biology and those kind of things. All right. You want to vamp for a second? You want to vamp for a second so I can draw? You don't want to talk about that one? No, okay. I'll do it. I'm good now. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so state health insurance, like I said, this is the biggest challenge we're facing right now. Every school district is facing it, so we are not alone in that. But because of how school systems work and what we have access to for state health coverage, we are kind of hemmed in here without any other options. So unbelievably, from the 21-22 school year, that per month, per employee cost for health insurance was $945 per month. And the state legislature right now is finalizing another increase that's going to make it $1,885 per month per employee. It used to be slightly cheaper for the classified folks, which are your custodians, your maintenance, your bus drivers. Yes, sir. Yes, so it's tied into the pension program. Right, yes. Right. Right, we can't go, hey, this employee group, we'll pay you more, but you can't get insurance through us. If they are a full-time employee, we have to offer them benefits. So the financial impact on that, just comparing fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 26, is almost a $15 million increase in our expenses. So insurance for all staff costs on the employer side went from about $15 million to about $29.5 million in just 4 years. Like I said, the state funds the majority of our instructional staff, so it does offset some of that cost. But, for the classified side, we've seen a huge increase, and that is really all paid for with local funding and grants where possible. Talking about, again, how QB funding can look deceiving or not look or tell the whole picture. So looking at our last 4 years again here, our state QBE funding, our gross amount was, or what we received throughout the year, a little over 80 million 4 years ago, about 78 million the year after, about 78 and a half after that, and then it went up to 83 and some change this school year. But we know exactly how much the state is contributing for health insurance to fund those increases that I'm talking about. And if you back that out, we're actually receiving less money from the state that is free for us to use for instructional purposes or other needs that have popped up. So while our gross funding has increased over $3 million in those 4 years, when you back out the health insurance that they're funding, we've lost about $4.5 million. So other challenges, obviously unfunded state mandated costs. When instructional personnel are given raises, that doesn't cover everybody. So the board has to make tough decisions about who gets those, and if we're going to expand those to other folks, how do we pay for it? And then an interesting thing that happened, was it last year or 2 years ago, Gina? Last year? Was this House Bill 538, which is an early literacy, it's called the Early Literacy Act, which objectively, great thing. We want to make sure that our kids can read, that they are literate, going into from third grade to middle school to high school, all the way throughout the process. But what happens so often in these situations is the state will pass something that we have to abide by, that we have to provide reporting on, but they don't attach any funding to it. So there was zero state funding attached to this. And the curriculum and materials for the vendors that we could pick from that were in this piece of legislation cost us about $1 million that we didn't have in the budget, hadn't planned for until this got finalized in April or so that year. In addition, we had to hire 2 people, I believe, to manage this program and the reporting that is required by the state law to just manage this new thing that is on top of what we were already doing. Obviously, inflationary costs are affecting us all, eggs and everything else. But for us, the biggest impact we've seen is diesel fuel for the buses is still higher than pre-COVID numbers to this day. Utilities, obviously, still going up. Things like custodial supplies, the paper and soap and those kind of things. That's not why there wasn't any in there, but they have increased in cost. And then our child nutrition department, they work with a vendor that wins the bid for food every year. They don't have a lot of choice in that because not a lot of people, reply to those bids. And the food cost is what the food cost is, and we've got to work within a lot of guidelines on calorie counts and healthy meals and things like that, right, Chris? Yeah. We have had to implement some necessary pay scale increases in the last couple of years. When Director Daniel and HR did a salary study last school year, comparing us to 30 other similarly sized school districts in the state of Georgia, we identified 3 groups mainly that were at the bottom, were at the literal bottom, 30 out of 30, or like 27th out of 30, that we had to increase their pay scales in order to keep quality folks in our schools. Mainly it was paraprofessionals, clerical workers, bookkeepers, and custodians. And, you know, we've got those in a good place now for the first time in a long time. Some of these roles were starting off at $10 an hour after the increase, not before. So they were needed even though we were pretty tight financially. So what are we going to do to right the ship here or deal with these mandated expenses, these healthcare costs that have added so much to our expense line with not the same amount of funding to cover it? One good thing here recently is that there was a change in a government accounting standard, which is what I have to follow in the accounting world, that has allowed us to expand the use of eSplost to cover things like instructional subscriptions and licenses. So there's not a lot of textbooks in schools anymore, guys. You know, so these are all online tools that come with materials, but they're mostly tools that are through a Chromebook or an iPad or that kind of thing. And so now that this government accounting standard has changed, we can use this eSplost money, which is normally just for construction and maintenance and those kind of things, to offset some of these instructional costs and get those out of the general fund. We're also just going to consciously shift more regular maintenance projects to eSplost to offset increased costs. Right now, we're looking at replacing 2 roofs within the county on 2 schools. The cheapest one's about $1.5 million. So with eSplost being able to take on that burden, you know, it allows general fund to be used for those instructional needs. We have eliminated positions in the last year, and we're planning on doing that this year too through attrition. So during the budgeting process last year, we eliminated roughly 70 positions, which saved about $4 million. And they were spread across the gamut. So instructional positions, paraprofessionals, district office staff, and clerical staff. So everybody felt a little bit of pain there, but we came out leaner and meaner on the other side. And then, yes. Well, yeah, you want to take that?
Yes, so we do have a lot of positions coming up. It is still significantly lower than the norm. On average, we hire somewhere around 100 teachers every summer, but that is through a variety of things: retirements, resignations, things of that nature. But yes, I mean, these are positions that we have to fill. We've eliminated those positions that were borderline or ones that we could live without, but these are positions teachers have been with us and they're retiring, and we've got to fill those spots.
I want to follow since you're coming from 49 to 60.
Great experience. Don't have to pay benefits. They continue to bring in some income on their end as well, and they're very valuable in the classroom, obviously. We are wrapping up our allotment this year, and we've got about 20 other positions that we've eliminated via attrition. What's interesting that we found, especially in the paraprofessional space, those needs change a lot. So sometimes we've got a special ed student that needs a one-on-one paraprofessional to provide them the services they need on a day-to-day basis. But once that student graduates, maybe that paraprofessional spot's not needed anymore or can be shifted somewhere else. So we're making sure that we stay on top of what we've allotted every year to fit the current student body in place. So savings of about $1.36 million are what I'm estimating there. Here's just a little graph showing our total employee count over the last few years. So you can see back in the COVID days, we were in the mid 1700s. With the cuts we did last year, we were down to 1721 when AJ submitted our employee numbers in around October of last year. So we see that number going closer to 1,700 to start the next school year. Yes. Sure. Sure. Yeah. So some of the positions that we eliminated in there were COVID era folks. So we had additional academic interventionists in the school to help close learning gaps that developed when we had that period where kids were doing a lot of virtual learning or were not in the classroom consistently due to COVID. We had additional custodial staff in place to help sanitize and keep our facilities clean to try to cut down on illnesses. And then it's also, like Mr. Daniel said, we've got folks that are retiring that with the student body changes in place, the enrollment numbers that shift every year between the schools and grade levels that we no longer needed as far as class sizes go.
Sanitize the buses, things like that. So when you see that go up, you don't know what's going on there. It looks like, well, my goodness, you guys hired.
Oh yeah, that's what you were wanting me to say. Okay, I got it now.
Around
Yeah.
there, and you see where I'm going with that? So
Yeah.
Talk about how that wasn't paid for with local funding.
Right. Yeah. So when those increases we saw in FY 22 and 23 were those academic interventionists coming on, as well as those additional custodial staff and those kind of things. So those were paid with grant funds from the federal government due to COVID, but they went away at the end of fiscal year 24. So that definitely contributed to that employee number dropping.
And one more thing about that, when the ESSER funds were allocated from the federal government, we were supposed to use those to help with the effects of COVID. Some districts used them to offset expenses that were, the normal expenses, and then we're able to build up their reserves through that. So because we put extra interventionists and things to help our students who are coming out of COVID, we didn't save those funds. And we weren't supposed to. We weren't legally supposed to. But then we also didn't build up a huge reserve because of that.
Set the clicker down. All right, something we're looking at this year as well, but is still kind of in the planning phase, is we're probably going to have to start shifting these classified positions to a third party, just on the administrative side, really. So it would be something where they would retain their positions. They would still work for the same managers, same schools if they so wished, but it would allow us to offset those benefit costs, which the health benefits alone are going up to over $22,000 annually for the year, as well as things like FICA and Medicare, unemployment costs, workers' comp, and any kind of training invested in those folks. We're still working through the process, deciding how we're going to approach it. It might ultimately be a thing where it's done through attrition, or it might be volunteer basis, or it might be, hey, everybody's got to do this, but you still have a job, and we will work through that transition. And then not a new thing, a thing that I always like to talk about is, like I said, I've been here for 5 years. I think technically I'm the second longest tenured director, which tells you something. A couple years ago, we had everybody kind of retired at the same time, superintendent, all the directors, and so got a lot of new folks that have been in here in the last couple years, and there's been no, this is what we've always done. This is how we do it. We have turned over every stone to try to increase revenue anywhere we can to offset, the expenses that we're seeing. So, whether that's meeting with experts or the Department of Education to maximize those QBE earnings, consulting with our district legal counsel or our auditors to expand the use of those eSPLOS funds, exploring additional grants that maybe we haven't historically received, or even small things like working with our financial partners to make sure that the money sitting in our bank account earns as much interest as possible, which will allow us to offset more things. Yes, sir. eSPLOS, yes, sir. eSPLOS. Sure, yeah. We have an eSPLOS committee, which is made up of...
So talk about which one, how that, so 4 cents of your dollar goes to state tax.
3 cents.
No, the 4 cents that goes to the state.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah. So, yeah, it's, sales tax in Catoosa County is 7%, 4 goes to the state, 2 go to the county for their flavor of losts, which are local option sales taxes, and then 1 comes to us for the education special purpose local option sales tax. But we have an eSPLOS committee that meets monthly, if not more often, that includes technology, facilities, Superintendent Nix, Assistant Superintendent Dr. Butler, myself, our maintenance manager, Jake Haynes, who is also a commissioner for the city of Ringgold. I said that. And so we sit down, we say, hey, Jake, what are you hearing from the schools saying that we need to address? Whether it's something broken in the bathroom or, hey, a new sidewalk to help our students get to the playground. We've got potholes over here that are hurting cars as they come through, or kids are tripping through them, all the way up to we've got a leak in the roof. We've got an HVAC unit that's going to go down soon, to the big facilities where we put out a survey when we're doing an eSPLOS before we start. We're actually going to put one out soon that gets, as part of our strategic plan, hears from the stakeholders in the community about what facilities or improvements or repairs that they see that are needed and they feel are a priority. So we take all those things into account and allot the funds that way. Yes. Yeah, so the T-SPLOST is for, like roads and stuff from the county. They also just have a regular LOST, a LOST, which is just allows them to offset property taxes at the county, which we cannot do that. And this East... Right, yeah, it just offsets the money that they collect through property taxes to pay for anything they need. But schools only have access to this flavor of SPLOST, which is eSPLOST, that's used for capital projects. You're welcome.
Hey, before you get to those questions, talk about this sheet on the back.
Yeah, so on the back of the one that has the senior exemptions on it, there's a graphic there as well, which is meant to illustrate, like I talked about earlier, high property values versus what the school tax rate is. So again, I know all the counties throughout the state are different, but these are the ones kind of in our immediate area, and we included Gordon as well because it's in that I-75 corridor, and similarly sized that in comparison to Catoosa County. So, we've got the average home values on here that I pulled earlier this week based on your Zillows and Redfins and Realtor.com and that kind of thing. And then what that school tax rate is, or the millage rate, to be able to show that comparison. So what's interesting is, like we've said on here, Catoosa's got higher property values, which has driven up how much taxpayers have to pay for their property taxes every year, but a lower school tax rate. Remember, the bottom of that threshold's 14, and we're at 14.870. And then you've got, Gordon, which has a higher property value, or average property value closer to us in Catoosa, but their millage rate's also in the 16s. Walker was kind of the other end of it, low property values. They've got a millage rate that's just right above ours. And then Whitfield is kind of flip-flopped. They've got low property values, but their millage rate is 18.756 right now. So it's just to illustrate those folks, our neighboring school systems right around us, how the math can differ and why these things can fluctuate one way or the other. We're the third largest. So Whitfield has about 12,500. We've got about 10,000. Gordon is
has
about
6,500.
6,500. So they've got a higher millage rate than us and about 3,500 less students. And then Walker's about 8,000
Yeah,
students,
a little under
7,500,
8,
something
yeah,
like that. So, we've got the second highest school tax by that calculation, but third highest student count.
Assuming Gordon's not counting Calhoun.
Calhoun City, no, correct. Correct, yes. Any of those schools, like in Chickamauga, in Walker. Yes, sir. All right.
Put like Dade on there. Dade has, that three schools, you have 1,000, 1,200 kids.
Yeah.
So we tried to find folks that are close to us. If you get in the metro area, all bets are off. Then you get down in South Georgia, like in Valdosta, some of those schools, they don't even have a computer in them. I mean,
Yeah.
so we tried to get some that are closer to us. I say not a computer, joking, but they do. They have, schools are so different. There's 159 counties. You got 180 school districts because they are pieced up with some cities and things like that.
Yes, sir.
I'm still going back to where we were, as a county, ranked the last as far as property tax. They said our houses are worth, is that correct? Is what you said?
Yes, so in 2022, and I put this link in here so you can go out and look at that sales ratio study when you get this presentation tomorrow. But in 2022, we were the second most undervalued in the state of Georgia, according to the state's measurements. Correct. Well, that's when they raise the property values based on these measurements. Because if they don't, if there's a whole process, obviously I'm not working in the county government, so I can't speak to it exactly. But there is a 3-year window here where if the county does not get in line with what the sales ratio study is measuring, they get fined, or they can even come in and force them to increase it to what they have measured it down in Atlanta. So and that's something that we have we are not involved in the property or the property value measurement process. I went to the meeting last year where they decided to do the 30+% increase on property values, and I was the only one in the audience. So it is something that we are beholden to in many ways: local fair share, equalization, the local tax, how that comes out. But it's something that we have very little control over. Right. Walker just passed in East Boston. There was like a 2% turnout or something like that. It's like 1,500 people. So. Right.
And that's one thing. So when our property values were so misaligned for those few years, the state knows how much your property's worth. And so that local fair share that the school system was having to pay in was based on what our property was actually worth, not what we were collecting. So we were kind of collecting at the silver rate, like Mr. Nick says, and we were paying the state at the gold rate. So it created that gap in funding that occurred.
And that's where we lost, guys. This is where it's so difficult to explain. It's so complicated, local fair share and equalization. So that is where we lost literally millions and millions of dollars. I mean, because you're losing on both ends. They're keeping, and that's costing you millions, and then you're
not replacing it at the same rate, because
so important.
What we collect at the local level, what a mill is worth, is determined by those locally adopted values. But what we lose in that local fair share is determined by the state's sales ratio study. So we were in a situation there really in fiscal year 22 and 23 where we were losing way more in local fair share, which is supposed to be equal to 5 mills, than we could replace with 5 mills locally, because they just weren't valued the same way. Yes, ma'am. No, I wouldn't say it has, exorbitantly changed, but it has ticked up. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Has class size changed? Yeah. So elementary went from what, probably 22 to 25?
And then for first and third grade, it's 24 for the maximum class size. For fourth and fifth grade, it's 28, and this is for next year. For middle school, it's 30, and then for high school, it's 32. Now, that's not saying that every class is at that, but no class will be over that.
But we also have class minimums.
We do.
Right.
Because the days of having, I've got a class with 12 kids. No, you don't.
So some
Yeah.
things that we've had to do, particularly at the high school level, where we've cut a lot of positions even this year, is we've had to say, AP chemistry and AP physics, you've got 10 enrolled in each. You can't offer them every year. So you're going to have to alternate and do one year, one next. Or we're going to offer it here with Mr. Pierce at the CCA. He's opened up these classrooms, and we already have bus transportation that runs midday. So maybe, 3 come from one high school, 4 from one, and 6 from another, and we have a bigger class size. So those are some things, and we've had to say we're not offering some classes because the enrollment was so low. So those are just some things that we've had to do that's hurt a little, but we've also got to get our budget. We're
I thought that was the whole purpose of this academy was the AP. Basically.
No, but we'll take you on a tour when we're done here if you want.
That's okay.
We do have some.
Mr. Pierce will give you the whole tour here in a little bit if you're interested. Yes. Love it. I would say in districts our size, it is about 16 and a half or 17. Mhm. Yes. It's state law. If you want to keep your equalization, you can't go below 14. There is a bill right now that they're looking at that, but it has not changed at this time. Sure. Yeah. Hey, believe it or not, I'm not either. Yeah.
14 to 20 is the range.
14 to 20 is the range. Yeah. You can't go above 20 legally either by law. Right. The fact that a server farm was open behind Burger King in Ringgold, is a big development that, whether we like it or not, is going to help us on the tax front too.
And that's one reason that some bigger counties can give more exemptions is because they have more revenue coming in. So their home values are worth more and they have more industry and commercial property.
So I serve on this committee, and every 5 years, the county has to go through it's the 5-year plan. And so I'm on the committee, and so we had our first meeting last week over at the county, the Justice Building. When I'm over there, there's 100 folks, you think, in there? And so they're breaking things up, and they're going through all the data first. And 82, that's the number, Austin, that stood out to me. Think about it now. 82% of the people who live in this county drive outside of this county to work. We are, whether you like it or not, it is the absolute fact. We are a bedroom community for Chattanooga. So our folks that live here, over 8 out of 10 of the people, they drive somewhere else to work. So we do not have the industry, like you're talking about, Charles, to generate the revenue to offset so many of these things. So when you're looking at places like Fulton and Cobb and Gwinnett, and Dr. Butler was talking about this, you're going to generate revenue through your income tax, 5%, whatever it is on your income tax, where you fall in that tax bracket. It's all generating some type of revenue. And the houses that are here, it's a two-edged sword. Because if you have a house, thank God, because you contribute back into helping the community, because that's a source of revenue for schools and police officers, firefighters, government, roads, 911 center. But so if you don't have that, then you don't have anything. But if you do have that, then you need more. So we are the economic development engine of Catoosa County, period. When Mark said that in the beginning, he's got 16 folks who are going to leave here and go get a job at $42,000 a year. That's what we want folks to do. We don't want them living under a bridge because they are not helping anything. They're costing. Now, I'm talking about high level, but that is a fact, 82%. So what happens is those folks will come in here and they will buy and pay more for your house than you would. Period. My wife and I, we've tried to look at houses. I'm going to tell you, they will sell in Appleton and come down here and make a cash offer on a home. And hey, we would like to sell ours first. Well, good luck, because they're moving in here, selling their homes because they want to be in our school system. Just like you mentioned, I have heard so many folks say, you guys do this. I was stopped today. I am stopped every meeting I go to. You guys have the greatest special ed program I've ever seen anywhere. And I can sit here and name places. I know. I hear it every day. The best, it's not a secret really anymore, but the best kept secret in this whole entire area is Catoosa County. And when I looked at a house, our realtor, I said, God, that's a lot for that house. And here's all she said. It's Catoosa. Our property values eclipse everyone around us by a mile. And so I tell folks, they say, well, you guys raised the taxes. No, we didn't. The board doesn't have, well, they do have the authority to raise the tax rate for the school system, but guess what? They lowered it a little bit. It wasn't the taxes that went up. It was the values that went up. If I can get people to understand that, the entire dialogue changes. And when I do that, I had this same question asked to me this morning, which is why I had Austin make this sheet. I got asked this in our bus meeting this morning. They said, well, the taxes went up so much. Why, you guys should be sitting on piles of money. No, that's not what happened. The values went up. The taxes actually went lower. Well, why did you get more? Because the values went up. And I say like this, I just looked at Austin. He was there, AJ was with me. I said, AJ drives a Maserati. He doesn't. He's a Jeep guy. AJ drives a Maserati. I drive a Honda. I drive a Ford, actually. Who's going to pay more in taxes? AJ is, because his car it's valued more. If you make more money, then the government keeps what? more money. That's just the way economics works. So I'm trying to do these things to help folks understand what is going on in our community. And these types of things, I wish we'd have had to move that wall, and there would have been folks sitting in here all the way out, and we have a line out the back of the door. We have, 70,000 people in Catoosa County. And this is what you got over here listening to one of the biggest concerns going on right now. And so I applaud you for being here. But I want you to understand that if you can grasp a hold of that 82%, you're going to understand the county that you live in a whole lot better.
And to just tie a bow on that too, like Mr. Nick said, we've got this additional funding coming in locally because of property values going up, but it's really just allowing us to catch up on these costs, on the state healthcare costs and that kind of thing. And even these raises we gave that were pretty minimal for most were appreciated, but Amanda, how much can a psychologist go to Walker County and make in comparison to here? Right. Yeah, AJ, on a teacher, how much more can they make in Whitfield than they can here? Right, about 6,000 more. So we've still got these places where we've got less staff. They're not paid what their counterparts are paid in neighboring counties. And this money that we are able to collect because of property values going up are just keeping us afloat really right now. So it is allowing us to catch up a little bit, but not where our counterparts are.
But why do we have 75 people when AJ went to UTC? Why did he get 75 resumes this year, and 2 years ago he got 3? Well, one is because he's really good at his job, and number 2 is because we are the best, period. While I'm sitting here, I just showed a text from my 2 bosses. It was from a very, very powerful person. Everyone in here would know his name. He said, I have someone moving to this area. They want a job. Do you have anything available? Catoosa County is at the top of my list. We know we're great. And what we've got to do, guys, is we've got to buckle down and get through another tough year, and then things are going to get better. Because now that those property values are equalized, we're going to be fine. And had that not happened, I would have $25 million in the bank right now to pay bills. The board could do nothing about it. I could do nothing about it because we do not determine the property values in Catoosa County. Period. And we're there. We're going to be fine. I've just got to get folks to settle down a little bit and stay off Facebook. That's like if you feel something in your side and you're like, I'm going to figure out what that is. Before long, you go doctoring yourself on Google, you'll think you've got cancer. So that's what I've got to get our folks to guys to settle down. We're going to be fine. We can pay the bills. We're going to get out of this. It's going to be okay. We just came out of the pandemic. It's going to be all right.
Yeah, and bottom line is we're in a better place today than we were a year ago and 2 years ago. And we're in a position now where we can do what we need to do in short term and long term going forward. And,
Can I make one comment?
yes, ma'am. Of course.
Something that I hear all the time that says, but you're fully funding QBE.
Mm-hmm.
And we are. That's a true statement.
Well, you mean the state legislature says they're fully funding
Yes,
QBE? Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to say who, but
Sure,
we
sure,
hear it
sure.
all the time. QBE is fully funded, and that's a true statement. But you can see that fully funding doesn't fully support what we're doing. And so that's the challenge that we have. So I just want to make sure when you hear that, you're fully funded. Well, yeah, true. But that's not everything that we need to consider. So just want to make sure y'all, I'm sure you hear that, Buzz. I'm assuming you do.
Well, they put it in the paper every year when the governor says it, so I'm betting they do. And one more thing on the exemption front that I should have put in the presentation. I didn't even think about that. It happened recently. So House Bill 531 got passed last year. What it did was that it put in place a statewide homestead exemption that floats. So essentially freezes your home values at the end of 2024, and it can only go up by what inflation is measured at by the Department of Revenue in Atlanta. And our board, after looking at it, hearing the pros and cons, allowed that to go in place here in Catoosa County to give folks a break on property taxes and to make sure there's not a huge fluctuation of 20% or 30% that takes everybody surprise anymore. This is public record, so I'm going to say it, but Whitfield and Dalton City Schools did not do that. They have their reasons for it. I get it. And many districts throughout the rest of the state opted out of that House Bill 531 as well, to where that isn't going to go into place for their school taxes to keep them under control. But our board did a brave thing and allowed that to go into place. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Correct. The only way we can increase it is if we increase the millage rate. Yeah. Yes.
It is very twisted.
To elaborate on that too. Well. Yeah, and to elaborate on that, you're seeing that in the newspaper and on the news, right? Well, we are legally required to publish press releases and articles in the paper, and they give us the exact text we have to write. And it is, Catoosa County is meeting on this day to consider a property tax increase of this. No matter if it is because property values went up, or it's because we're increasing the millage rate, or vice versa. So we don't have control over how that message is delivered other than in the public hearings that we have, or if folks ask us in a nice way. Yes. Yes. Yes, ma'am. It was Superintendent Nix. Yes. Yeah. The call to action, as we refer to it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't do press as much as I can.
But that is so true, because when I get defensive, I'm an ex-cop, and I go like fight or flight. I get this adrenaline up. They're attacking our school system, they're attacking our teachers, they're attacking our board, and so I just want to just run in there like I did when I was a cop, and I'm having to realize I'm 54. I'm not a cop anymore. It takes time, and you're going to say it. The first time means nothing, but it's like in the classroom almost when you're teaching the classroom of those middle schoolers. That 97th time, some guy's going to go, wait a minute, Atlanta's the capital of Georgia? That's how it's happening, and you're right. I'm beginning to see that. So there's a real struggle between when do you speak up and when do you just leave it alone? And it's really difficult sometimes to make that decision when I want to attack this piece or defend that piece, or attack this bad piece of legislation, or just let it go. Because if I say nothing, they carry the day. But if I say too much, I'm wore out, and I'm got down on the level of a child almost arguing with somebody who has a political axe to grind. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I agree with you. It is getting out, and that's why I just tell folks, guys, look, I'm good at my job, and I have thick skin. And people take pictures of me when I'm in the front yard without a shirt on. I always keep a t-shirt shirt on, and then they want to put you on there and make a funny face about you, but that's my job, and I'm good at my job. But if I could just get everybody to say, you know what, that's a great school system. Everybody knows it. I don't know what's going on in there, I don't understand it all. But whatever they're doing is working, and they're getting better and better at coming out of this. And in 2 or 3 years, you're going to see me at Walmart, and you're going to say, remember we talked about that, and it's all going to be fine. And what I'm trying to do is, in the meantime, try to keep people from burning bridges, so when they pass somebody, you can't look at it in the church anymore. Because you, in a moment of stress or anger or fear, you responded in a way that's very ugly, and you burned a relationship. So, we're going to be fine. We're coming out of it. The board is, find somebody who has lower taxes. If you do, I want to know. Send it to me. I'd like to see them. I don't know. We have 4 seniors and 4 on the books now. How many seniors?
Four.
We've got 4 senior exemptions on the books now, and we will likely get a 5th one. No, we're not opposed to another senior exemption. The board was never opposed. All we'd asked for was that, hey, we don't really want millionaires moving in here like they're doing over in Dade County. Dade County has no money. I know Josh. He's my friend. He's the superintendent. They have no money. None. They have millionaires that are moving in over there, buying acres everywhere and building homes on it. It's driving the property values through the roof. And if you don't have balanced exemptions, that winds up hurting seniors in the long run, because now a senior can't even afford to pay their bills. So we just got to have cooler heads prevail, and it's going to be fine, I promise you. But thank you, Sherry. What's your last name? Thank you, Sherry, for sharing that. I appreciate that.
And I think
Yes.
one more thing that you might hear on Facebook or wherever you look is that why is their reserve dropping so low? They must be mismanaging their money. Well, our board knew our reserve was dropping low. They knew, what was happening, that our values weren't correct, but they also knew that the tax assessor's office was receiving a fine to get those assessments right. And so they could have fixed our reserve problem easily by raising the millage rate at the same time values were going up, and we wouldn't have a low reserve. But they were trying to balance our property owners and our system and do it slowly, which is the problem with some of these bills that have been introduced, is that it's just so much at once. It's hard to dig out of that hole when you have so many things that you're trying to cope with at one time.
I have one question, because our kids, we've been living in county for over 20 years. When we first moved in here, y'all used to put out a monthly newsletter, not just to the parents, but to the county, telling them everything where I can understand all of this. What's going on?
There is a quiz in a minute for you to prove that.
We're recording, correct? I'm telling you, we put it everywhere. It is all over the website. I push it out every single week.
And-
Recording tonight, and this can go out. So I hope you, Charles, will go every contact that you have, and every person you know. Send this information out. I sent an email out to over 2,000 people today. So please come tonight and listen to Austin. He's brilliant, and he will explain a lot of these things. And, I'm thankful you're here, but like I said, I wish everyone was here. So when you, to whom much is given, much is required. And we've been getting a lot of information. This is your last meeting. We're not going to worry about that. We'll talk about that in May. But please, I'm one person. I'll send them out in the home news. You'll see it when you get home. It's at 5 and 6. I did a news story about this today. We've got to have an army of people like you, Charles, to go out, spread the good news, spread the gospel, and when we do that, then this is what's happening, what Vaughn said. It is getting out. It's just like, we probably set it down, I think we're like 94, so 5, 6, 7, all should be the person that breaks it down.
And I'll say this too, like this new leadership group I talked about, led by Superintendent Nix and Dr. Butler and all the directors in this room, we have taken a radical transparency approach. Myself, Dr. Butler, Superintendent Nix has gone to every school staff meeting, not every school staff meeting, to a staff meeting at every school to talk about this. I gave a similar presentation last year to every employee in the district that would listen. We have LSGTs that are local school governance teams in each school that are made up of parents, teachers, and community members. We went and spoke to all of those to talk about these same things. And then folks that are part of our ACE team, which is people that are the leaders of the LSGTs, business owners, those kind of things. We pulled them in, and I gave a similar talk to them. So we are trying to get the word out as much as possible, but there's always room for improvement there for sure.
So we just want to say we appreciate you. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts for just being willing to come and learn. And we are always open to questions. So you guys have Shannon Lewis's email. So if you have questions, you can email any of us, or you can email her and she'll direct you to the correct person. If you have questions afterward, we're always open to answering your questions. But we also want to recognize you for just taking your time, your personal time, and coming out and learning about our school system and our community and how they interact with one another. So on May the 6th, here in this room right here, we would like to recognize you at a school board meeting. So, our school board is just appreciative of you, and they want to recognize you in front of everyone for doing that. So please put that on your calendar, and on May the 6th at 6 o'clock, if you'll be here, we'll have a little certificate of completion for you, but mainly we just want to say thank you.
Yes, so guys, can we give Austin a hand? This guy's brilliant, and now you know why I said what I said. And yeah, please be here. It will be so fun, and we want to recognize you. And make sure that you get your colleagues, because some were at some meetings and some were at others, and I get that. You can't be at every single one. We understand that some of our folks have ball teams, and they're playing with those things as well. Thank you to everyone here. Thank you to the Career Academy for letting us use the auditorium this evening. Thank you, Becky, for pushing all this stuff out, getting it recorded for us, the video, the audio, all those good things. And then Shannon will push that out to everyone, and especially Austin. Thank you so much, sir. You are our hero. Thank you very much. You are dismissed.